A dangerous questioning. If wine is forbidden, why did Jesus turn water into wine? If the joy of celebration is wrong, why does the Bible speak of feasts and banquets? If dancing is a sin, why did David dance before the Ark of the Covenant? These questions have echoed through the depths of time, yet few have dared to answer them. The debate over earthly pleasures has always been controversial among the religious and skeptics alike. But what if someone far more powerful raised these questions? According to ancient traditions, Lucifer was an angel of the highest celestial hierarchy, endowed with unparalleled wisdom and beauty. His name, meaning bearer of light, signified his closeness to absolute truth. However, it was this very pursuit of truth that led to his fall. In the darkest and most forbidden theological accounts, there are records of a supposed dialogue between Lucifer and the other angels, in which he questions certain divine laws, among them the prohibition of earthly pleasures. He is said to have asked why the Creator allowed humans to enjoy wine, music, and dance if these very elements could lead them to damnation. The answer he received was vague, and it was precisely this lack of clarity that ignited the flame of doubt. Lucifer did not want to obey blindly. He wanted to understand, and it was this thirst for answers that put him at odds with the commands of the Almighty. But what if his questions still make sense today? Think about it. How many times have you seen religious leaders condemning parties and drinking, while at the same time hosting banquets and celebrations within their own churches? Is the problem in the act itself or in the way it is carried out? What does the Bible truly say about this? And most importantly, what really drove Lucifer to become the one who would defy divine laws? The answer may be more terrifying than we imagine. The forbidden wine, the great contradiction. If wine is the work of the devil, why did God allow Noah to drink it? If drunkenness is a mortal sin, why did Jesus serve wine at his first miracle? Lucifer walked among the celestial halls, listening to discussions among the angels. He observed how humanity was judged for its choices, but something seemed contradictory to him. The Bible condemned drunkenness but exalted wine in various passages. How could something be both sacred and forbidden? In biblical writings, wine appears as a symbol of joy and celebration. Noah, upon leaving the ark, planted a vineyard and became drunk. Genesis 9:21. Melchizedek, priest of the Most High God, served bread and wine to Abraham, Genesis 14:18. In Psalm 104:15, it is written that wine gladdens the heart of man, but then came the big question. If wine was accepted and even encouraged, why did some religious leaders condemn its consumption? In the times of Jesus, wine was part of Jewish culture. The wedding at Cana is one of the most striking examples. Christ's first miracle was turning water into wine, and not just any wine, but the best wine of the feast, John 2:111. To Lucifer, this seemed like a cruel irony. If the Son of God himself celebrated with wine, why do churches today prohibit its consumption? Was wine a sin, or was it the excess of it? Was the problem in the substance itself or in the behavior of those who consumed it? Then an even more disturbing dilemma rose. If the Bible does not directly prohibit wine, could other prohibitions also be misinterpreted? Lucifer's questioning did not stop there. If wine was accepted within biblical contexts, what about festivals, dancing, and celebrations? The greatest mystery was just beginning. Festivals, dances, and the wrath of heaven. If celebrating is a sin, why did God command celebrations? If dancing is shameful, why did David, the chosen king, dance before the Ark of the Covenant? Lucifer's questions echoed among the angels. He observed humanity and noticed something curious. People were punished for what, in earlier times, was allowed. What had changed? In Jewish tradition, festivals have always been an essential part of culture and faith. God himself commanded sacred festivals, such as Passover, Exodus 12:14, the Feast of Tabernacles, Leviticus 23:34, and the Jubilee, Leviticus 25:10. In these celebrations there was food, joy, and of course wine. But there was something even more controversial: dance. David, one of the greatest kings of Israel, not only danced but did so before the Ark of the Covenant, something considered sacred. In the account of 2 Samuel 6:14, David danced with all his might before the Lord, and even when his wife, Michal, criticized him, he replied that he would dance even more. Lucifer pondered, if David, a king chosen by God, danced without fear, why do churches today condemn dancing? The truth is that over the centuries, many religious leaders have transformed faith into a set of inflexible rules, forgetting the original context. But if all of this was allowed in the past, what made festivals, drinks, and dancing become things of the devil? Could it be that these restrictions were more a tool of control than a divine command? And what if all of this had been distorted over time? Lucifer's rebellion may have begun precisely at this point, the desire to understand the rules and not just follow them. But in questioning the divine, he crossed a dangerous line. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, to help us unravel all these mysteries. Is sin in the festival or in the heart? If the festival is an invitation to sin, why did Jesus himself participate in celebrations? If the issue is the intention, then isn't the human heart the true culprit? Lucifer walked among the records of human history and noted something intriguing. Jesus never condemned festivals, On the contrary, he was seen on various occasions participating in banquets and social gatherings. At Levi's house, a tax collector, Jesus dined with sinners, and the Pharisees questioned his actions, Luke 5:29-30. In the parable of the prodigal son, the return of the repentant, young man was celebrated with a great feast, Luke 15:23-24. If Jesus, who was the very essence of holiness, sat at the table with sinners, laughed, talked, and celebrated, why do many religious people condemn those who do the same? The problem was not in the festival itself, but in what was done within it. Lucifer realized that human judgment was selective. Many condemned the youth for going to parties, but participated in luxurious dinners, grand weddings, and gatherings filled with laughter and toasts. If the festival itself were the problem, then all these meetings should be prohibited. The real issue lay within each person's heart. Uncontrolled drunkenness, excesses, vices, the malice that some spread in these environments, those were condemned. But what about those who simply want to have fun, celebrate with friends, and enjoy moments of joy? If the Creator gave humanity the capacity to feel pleasure and joy, why has the simple act of having fun become a taboo? This was a question that many feared to express, but which Lucifer dared to challenge. And it was precisely this audacity that put him at odds with divine laws. After all, if questioning is a sin, is blind obedience really a virtue? The non-existent prohibition. If Jesus celebrated festivals, if David danced, if wine was part of sacred traditions, where exactly is the prohibition? Lucifer studied the ancient texts and noticed something unsettling. There was no clear prohibition against drinks, festivals, or dances. The Bible condemned drunkenness and excess, Proverbs 21, warned against the dangers of losing control, but never stated that the simple act of drinking or celebrating was a sin. Then an even more dangerous question arose. If there is no explicit prohibition, why do so many churches insist on claiming the opposite? Over the centuries, many religious leaders created their own rules, interpreting isolated passages of Scripture to justify their prohibitions. But in doing so, were they shaping faith according to their own interests? After all, a questioning people is harder to control. Lucifer realized that the more rules were imposed on the pleasures of life, the more people felt guilty for simply existing. And once dominated by guilt, they became more prone to follow any imposition without questioning. If the Creator gave humanity free will, why do so many try to deny that right? This thought made Lucifer be seen as a rebel, someone who challenged the established order. But the question remained, was he truly wrong or just trying to understand the truth? The answers to these questions could completely change the way we understand faith and freedom, and perhaps that is why this debate has never been fully settled. The truth no one wants to see. If the Bible speaks of freedom, why do so many religious leaders preach fear? If God gave free will, why do some want to decide in place of the Creator himself? Lucifer realized that the rules about festivals, drinks, and dances were not divine but human. He saw how religion, over the centuries, manipulated interpretations to maintain control over the faithful. After all, when a person is afraid of making mistakes, they become more obedient. And when someone feels guilty for the simple pleasures of life, they end up depending on the absolution of others. Jesus never forced anyone to follow him. He simply taught and allowed people to choose. But many religious leaders throughout history began to use fear as a tool. Lucifer questioned, why turn God into a tyrant? If God gave humanity the capacity to feel pleasure, laugh, dance, and celebrate, then why should this human nature be constantly suppressed? If the true sin lies in the heart of those who act with malice, why does judgment always fall on external things? The truth was simple. Fear keeps people under control, and those who control, govern. Lucifer saw this reality, but his attempt to expose this truth was interpreted as rebellion. He did not want to obey blindly. He wanted to understand. But for those in power, there was no room for questioning. It was this desire to comprehend that led him to be seen as an enemy. After all, the greatest fear of those who govern through faith is that people will discover they can think for themselves. Fear as a weapon. If God wants us to be free, why do so many religions preach fear? If faith should liberate, why does it often imprison? Lucifer observed how, over the centuries, fear had been used as a powerful weapon to control the masses. The fear of hell, the fear of divine punishment, the fear of making mistakes. But there was something even more intriguing. The rules were not the same for everyone. Common people were harshly condemned for small sins, while religious leaders, politicians, and figures of power enjoyed the same pleasures without punishment. This meant that the problem was never the drink, the dance, or the festivals. The true sin, in the eyes of those who controlled faith, was the freedom of those who were not supposed to have it. After all, if the people discovered they could rejoice, live, and still have faith, what would be the use of so many oppressive rules? Lucifer realized that true power lay in guilt. Those who feel guilty seek redemption, and those who control redemption control the faithful. But this reflection was too dangerous. Those who dominated faith could not allow people to realize that many of the prohibitions imposed on them did not come from God, but from man. And it was exactly this way of thinking that made Lucifer the greatest symbol of rebellion. He did not want to be worshipped. He did not want to take God's throne. He merely wanted to understand. But in the realm of those who govern through fear, questioning is already a mortal sin, the truth that was silenced. If questioning is a sin, then does faith demand blind obedience? If God gave us intelligence, why can't we use it to understand the truth? Lucifer did not accept empty answers. He wanted to know why certain rules changed over time. If something was a sin, shouldn't it be a sin forever? He saw how the church itself contradicted itself over the centuries. There was a time when Christians believed that instrumental music was forbidden in churches. Today it is part of the services. There was a time when drinking wine was normal. After all, even Jesus drank. Today, in some denominations, it is condemned. So who decides what is a sin and what is not? Lucifer realized that many of these rules did not come from God, but from human interpretations, often distorted. He began to see that the goal was not just to maintain faith, but to maintain control. After all, a person who does not feel guilt is a free person. But someone who feels constantly guilty for simple things like drinking, having fun, or questioning becomes a prisoner of the system. And it is at this point that Lucifer becomes dangerous, not because he wanted to challenge God, but because he wanted to expose a truth that no one wanted to hear. What would happen if people discovered that many of the prohibitions imposed on them did not come from God, but from religious leaders who shaped the rules according to their interests? And what if Lucifer's greatest heresy was not rebellion, but the simple audacity to ask? The greatest heresy of all. What is more dangerous to power, a sinner or someone who asks questions? If the truth sets us free, why do so many fear it? Lucifer realized that his true transgression was not an act of rebellion, but a question that no one wanted to answer. He did not just question religious rules, but the very system that imposed them. After all, if sin lies in excess and not in the act, why is drinking prohibited while gluttony is tolerated? If true worship comes from the heart, why should dancing be condemnable if done with joy and not with malice? If the Bible shows a Jesus who went to parties, celebrated life, and walked among those considered sinners, why do so many insist on preaching a grim and severe God who prohibits everything? Lucifer's greatest heresy was to show that faith, instead of imprisoning, should liberate. But those who control through faith do not want a free people. They need guilt. They need an enemy to keep fear alive. And who better to fill that role than the one who dared to question? Lucifer, the symbol of forbidden curiosity, became the villain of the story. Not because he challenged God, but because he challenged those who hold power over faith. After all, who would have more to lose if people discovered that many of the rules imposed on them did not come from heaven, but from the earth? The danger of freedom. If God gave us free will, why do so many try to deny it? If faith is about choices, why are there so many who want to choose for us? Lucifer realized that the true danger was never sin, but freedom. A free people thinks for itself, and those who think question. If people realized they could live their lives without the constant fear of punishment, without guilt for every choice, what would happen to those who use faith to control? Fear would lose its power. Guilt would cease to be a chain. Religion, instead of being an instrument of domination, would return to being just what it always should have been, a personal journey. But this was unacceptable for those in power. That's why Lucifer needed to be transformed into the greatest enemy. He could not be seen as someone who merely wanted to understand. He needed to be a traitor, a symbol of evil, a warning to all who dared to follow his path. But in the end, what is more dangerous? The one who imposes rules and fear to maintain control, or the one who simply asks questions? Perhaps that is why, to this day, this debate has never been settled. Because as long as there are those who question, the story will never be complete. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, so together we can uncover all these mysteries.